and Kevin Paul also have birthdays in September. Andrea, and who else? Andrea Carmel, and who else? Happy birthday to you. With Anne searched my past and my resources, and I decided that my best defense was art. So I started to write about art and my life and coming to New York. And here we have Sandy Farber, who was a friend of Marianne Nowak's in New York. But Marianne was in St. Louis at a certain point, and I'm going to read the first segment right now called Coming to New York. And I want to thank Elizabeth Hellman for, did you use the tape? Yes. Use the tape, for recommending to Andrew that he use a tape rather than the CD, and for recommending to me various changes in my writings. She's been very helpful. Thank you, Elizabeth, wherever you are. Okay. Anyway. Coming to New York, August 21st, 2014. Sitting in the dentist's chair today, I remembered how I met Marianne Nowak. I had been trying to remember for a few months, since Elizabeth Hellman had critiqued the draft of an essay that I was writing about Virginia Admiral, Robert De Niro Sr., and my early days in Soho. Elizabeth said that I needed to explain how I met Virginia. Marianne Nowak introduced me to Virginia, I told her. Then, how did you meet Marianne, she asked me. I couldn't remember it all, but today it came to me in a flash, and I played the memory over and over again until the cavity in my tooth was filled. Now go back. I hear the phone ringing. I am in the large floor-through living room of the suburban house close to St. Louis that my husband, our 4 children, and I have moved into. It is 1970. I walk to the desk in the back of the living room, pick up the receiver. I remain standing throughout the whole conversation, becoming agitated and angry. I am an artist, a female voice says, and I am starting a consciousness-raising group for women artists. I was giving your name and number. I'm not interested, I say. My life is difficult enough without my questioning it. I will only become more unhappy if I share my misery with a bunch of equally unhappy women. Moreover, if I begin to hate my husband consciously, it will be the end of my marriage. So don't pester me with your ideas. The voice belonged to a New Yorker, Marianne Nowak, a graduate student studying at Washington University School of Fine Arts at the time. She argued that it was the responsibility of older women artists like me to communicate with the younger women artists and to support them. We soon became hostile to each other and ended the conversation with Marianne telling me that I was crazy. A few days later, I joined the consciousness raising group. It was the end of my marriage and the beginning of my coming to New York. Back, okay? And all of this is St. Louis, right? It's a long time since my mother, Minerva Prim, having just got back from a long stay in Europe, asked Charles Quest, an up-and-coming artist known nationally for his woodcuts, if she could pose for him nude. He needn't pay her, she said. She just wanted to be the subject. Quest must have been an elegant presence at that time, a well-groomed, smallish man, much like my mother's uncles. His hair done in a style that ended with the fall of the Third Reich. Pulled all the way over to one side from the other, and his mustache well trimmed and pencil thin. There's a picture of him that I sent in my thing, right? Okay. When I took my first class in figure drawing with Quest years later at Washington University School of Fine Arts, 1956, he was an overweight old man in his 50s who ate baby food from jars for lunch because he had stomach problems. He was still groomed with style, but his hair had turned pure white. He was a kind man, the perfect teacher for terrified art school freshmen. Most of us had never seen a body totally naked other than our own in a full-length mirror. Our first model was a tall African-American woman with large breasts, close-cut hair, small head, and slender ankles and wrists. Her beauty was greater than anything we students could appreciate at the time. I have never forgotten the shape and grace of her body as she took a striding pose facing forward and then twisted her ribs to one side, causing her breasts to shift to a different perspective from the rest of her. Draw the big shapes, Quest would call out. Big Mary was her model's name to distinguish her from Little Mary, another figure model in the school. My mother arrived at Quest Studio and was greeted by his wife, Dorothy Quest, who was well known in St. Louis for her pastel portraits of children. Dorothy Quest remained nearby throughout the session while her husband painted an alla prima sketch of my nude mother in oil. The year must have been 1931 or 1932. Clausen Prim, my mother's uncle, whose name was given to her as a middle name, took my mother to Europe in 1928 when she was 18 in order to get her out of her mother's house. My grandmother, a devout Catholic, Lulu Gervais Pater Prim, had such loud screaming fights with my mother that their voices could be heard a block away. In Paris, Clausen took my mother to the Rodin Museum. There they saw cast brown sculptures of bodies frozen in the midst of actions, solid yet twisting in poses that showed the thrill of being alive through expressions of pain, endurance, ecstasy, love, and the whole miserable human condition. My mother claimed that on the boat on the way to or from Europe, Edith Sitwell had asked her what her favorite work of art was. Bernini's Ecstasy of St. Teresa was my mother's quick reply. Sitwell told her condescendingly that as she grew older, my mother would realize her folly and would come to understand that the statues of Michelangelo were far superior to Bernini's St. Teresa. Sitwell's great-nephew and biographer, William Sitwell, describes her as never having had a passionate relationship. Edith was returned unopened, one biographer wrote. Clausen, a descendant of Huguenots and a product of the Victorian age, fully appreciating and comprehending the revolutionary nature and cultural impact of Rodin's work, pulled my mother out of the Rodin Museum after a few minutes, saying that no niece of his was going to look at all those naked bodies. Throughout my childhood, my mother ranted and raved about Uncle Clausen's having deprived her of Rodin's artwork. He was a prude, she said. In his treachery, he would repress the pagan underpinnings of the Catholic faith that my mother used as touchstones in charting her life. Small reproductions of Botticelli's The Birth of Venus and Primavera were always on view in her dining room. In my mother's household, Venus ruled over the Virgin Mary, and the baby Jesus was more a god of fertility than anything else. All those naked bodies that my mother was not allowed to see and enjoy in 1928 now grace the models platform at my drawing studio in Soho, Spring Studio, on the corner of Spring and Lafayette, 7 days a week, year-round, in a never-ending flow of twisting poses that show the thrill of being alive through expressions of pain, endurance, ecstasy, love, and the whole miserable human condition. On the other hand, Uncle Clausen died in Rome in 1931, and his body rests in peace in the Protestant cemetery there, headstone number S2522. What is it that they say about art all the time? Ars longa, vita brevis. Art is long, life is short. Are you ready for one more?
Life is short.
Yes. I want to say, I lived for years in terror that Robert De Niro, the actor, would be angry with any of us because we exposed the fact that his father was homosexual, gay. But he did a documentary very recently, and it was shown at Sundance, and he's been on all the programs. So when I knew he was outing his father, I started to write a very, very long piece all about Robert De Niro Sr. And I sent it to 4 people, and one, a retired reporter from the Wall Street Journal, wrote back and said, Minerva, really, he said, it's more about you than it is about anyone else. Oh, it's all about you. So he said, why don't you write a memoir? And he said, but if it makes you feel good to write this, go ahead and feel good. You know, write it and feel that you've been healing yourself. So I put it aside. I thought, I can't write this anymore. And then I realized when I decided to do the memoirs, I could put Bob in as a creature in my memoir, since it's all about me anyway. So this is called Bob the Painter. What a handsome man he was. When I first saw him in the autumn of 1977, standing in the kitchen of his ex-wife, Virginia Admiral, in her loft on the corner of Spring and Lafayette in Soho, New York City. Tall, lean, somewhat rugged but graceful, Bob De Niro Sr. had a full head of brown curly hair, thin lips, a raspy voice, and a nose that arched just enough to give him a dignified profile. He was grateful, he said, for 3 things. First, I am thankful that we don't have to go to Englewood, New Jersey for Thanksgiving dinner. Second, I am thankful that I don't live in Russia. I didn't take note of the third cause of his rejoicing. It didn't matter. I knew right away I wanted to be his friend. He grew up in Syracuse, New York. His parents met at a party in an Irish neighborhood in Syracuse. Henry De Niro crashed the party, claiming to be a visitor from Cuba. He danced with Helen O'Reilly and walked her home. At her parents' front door, he kissed her. Engendered by that kiss were thousands of paintings and drawings, scores of movies, and eventually billions of dollars worth of prime real estate deals in Manhattan. After kissing Helen O'Reilly, Henry De Niro confessed that he was Italian, not Cuban, and that he lived across town, not in Cuba. Helen was pleased by his confession and thought that he was a gentleman. They married, and their firstborn was Bob, baptized Robert Henry De Niro. He was a beautiful child with blonde curls, so beautiful that his father feared as he grew older that pederasts would seek him out and corrupt him. Henry beat his son. Bob never forgave his father, nor did he easily forgive his mother for allowing the beatings. As a teenager, he found a second home at the Syracuse Art Museum, where his talent was recognized. He was given a place to draw and paint. He ran away in his mid-teens to Goose Rock Beach, Maine, where there was a teacher named Elliot O'Hara, the artist, author of 2 self-help books, Making Watercolor Behave, 1932, and Making the Brush Behave, 1935. He arrived at the beach in the dark, late. O'Hara's son suggested that he could sleep on the deck of O'Hara's boat until morning. Finding Bob asleep early in the morning, O'Hara was furious, ordered him to leave. One wonders about the scene, though. Was the older artist reacting on some level to Bob's youth and beauty, or was he just angry that there was a stranger asleep on his boat? Virginia Admiral, a Midwesterner whose parents relocated to the far west when she was young, met Bob at Hans Hofmann School in Provincetown in the early 40s. Her teachers in California had studied with Hofmann earlier, and they encouraged her to go east to study with him. Soon Bob and Virginia were lovers, but not exclusive lovers. Anais Nin has written about an argument that they had over Bob's being lovers with Virginia's friend Robert Duncan, the poet. The passage, I believe, is in Nin's diary covering 1943. When Virginia's younger sister gave birth to a son in California, she traveled to see the baby. Back in New York, she told Bob that they must marry so that she could have a child too. We can't marry, Bob told her. I'm homosexual. No, you're not, she said. They married. Virginia was 28 and Bob was 21 when their son Bobby was born. Mary Ann Nowak introduced me to Virginia Admiral in October 1977 when I arrived in New York. She described Virginia as being an interesting woman, an artist, writer, and political activist whose son was becoming a famous actor. Taxi Driver had come out the year before. Bobby's fame was just beginning to become a nuisance. Eventually, everyone around Virginia learned the drill. Never tell anyone that she was the mother of the famous actor. Never bring anyone to the loft who wanted to meet the mother of the actor. Deny that she was the mother of Robert De Niro if anyone were to ask. Virginia had just retired from running a small typing and printing company. She returned to painting and drawing, but found it difficult to get started again and to spend long periods of time making art. She felt she needed someone disciplined like me to keep her drawing every day. There was plenty of space in her loft, and she had a large circle of friends, many of whom had worked for her as typists when she was running her business. I began to spend every day in Virginia's loft with her friend Ruth Fortell, and Mary Ann. We drew each other, nude or clothed, or drew the many plants in the loft, or we set up still lifes. Occasionally we hired nude models. Nights I either stayed over with Virginia downtown, or I slept at my sister's on the Upper West Side. Virginia, loyal to the teachings of Hans Hofmann, did not approve of the way in which I drew. She considered my approach to be too realistic, academic, and illustrative. Can't you get her to stop drawing like that? She once asked Mary Ann. Bob, a frequent visitor to Virginia's loft, defended me, saying that it didn't matter how I drew as long as I continued to work. He accused Mary Ann and Virginia of being jealous of me because I found it easy to work hard. Of course, I loved him for defending me. A year later, I got a job proofreading and found a little tenement apartment on the corner of Kenmare and Mulberry, around the corner from Virginia's loft. My teenage daughter Teva came to New York to live with me. One late afternoon, Dick Brewer, an old friend of both Virginia and Bob's, made plans to see my drawings. He telephoned me on the way over to complain that Bob was insisting on coming too, and that he was sorry that he couldn't shake him. But I was delighted that Bob wanted to see my work. Teva and I lived in 3 rooms, a walk-in kitchen, a small middle room, and an even smaller bedroom, which was nearly all bed. In the middle room, I pulled out recently drawn pastels for Dick and Bob to see, some life-size nude portraits of friends, and tabletop still lifes of food and memorabilia. Without being asked to comment on the work, Bob began a fierce critique. The whole is not greater than the sum of the parts, or the whole is greater. Sounded at first like a cliche, but I have used Bob's signature criticism for years since I first heard him say it. At one point, I walked into the kitchen and Teva followed me. "Are you crying, Mom?" she asked. "Crying? Why would I be crying?" "Well, aren't your feelings hurt?" she asked. "He's saying mean things about your drawings." "No," I said, "he's giving me just what I need. He has a good eye. Now I know what drawings can be shown and which ones should be thrown out." So from that point on, I took Bob to be my mentor, but to tell the truth, he never took me to be his mentee. We were good friends, like family, going to openings and parties and performances together. And for years I cut his hair because he had the sort of hair that I could cut and shape easily, although I never studied hairdressing. The curls were forgiving, and he wanted to save money. Looking back on the haircuts now, I view the experience as classic primate grooming behavior, asexual touching that reinforces bonds of affection. So as the sun went down outside, the middle room darkened. "Turn the lights on," Bob said. I told him the truth, which is that I hadn't replaced the overhead light bulb because I needed to spend all of our money on food. So Bob insisted that we go out then and there to buy some light bulbs at the nearest bodega. The four of us walked 3 blocks over to Princeton Lot and stood giggling at the checkout counter of the bodega that used to be on the corner, and we chose a package of bulbs. Bob paid. It was La Vie de Bohème all over again. I promised to get into all the little details of my sex life too. Okay, so we're going to have the next set of performances at 8 o'clock, so drink. Yeah. Be merry.
That's really nice.
I know, she's a writer too, I didn't even know that.
Really?
I didn't know, I mean, you
I gave the wrestling girl your phone number. I have a little master plan. I'm trying to get in with these new people that are coming over here, these new rich people that are coming in here. Okay. Put it on Facebook. I proposed and she accepted. There we go. Susan's from New York. Oh my God.
I know.
What the hell is that?
I know, but
I'm recording this right.
oh my Celebrate, we're going to start with Jason and go on to Leticia, Esteban, and then Julie, and maybe, so may I present Jason doing, please turn off your cell phones. Right now, turn them off.
It's a cabaret number.
A Cabaret Number by Jason Giroux. Welcome, Jason.
Louder.
Écoute bien, c'est mieux qu'une histoire. C'est un conseil aux gens d'aujourd'hui. Réserve-lui un coin de mémoire. Ça peut servir aux amis. Si ta vie s'est mise à l'envers, tu chanteras demain. Si l'été se prend pour l'hiver, tu chanteras demain. Si la paix se prend pour la guerre, tu chanteras demain. En attendant, pour mieux passer le temps, tu peux taper dans tes mains. Si tu as raté ton métro, tu chanteras demain. Si ton cœur est tombé de haut, tu chanteras demain. Si cette terre se casse en morceaux, tu chanteras demain. Et jusque-là, pour répéter fois, tu peux taper dans tes mains. Si tu as perdu tes ballons, tu chanteras demain. Si tu rêves d'une autre maison, tu chanteras demain. Si tu chanteras demain. En attendant, tu le sais maintenant, quand vient la fin du refrain. En attendant, pour bien passer le temps, tu peux taper dans tes mains. Tu chanteras demain. Tu chanteras demain. Tu chanteras demain. En attendant, tu le sais maintenant, quand vient la fin du refrain. En attendant, pour bien passer le temps, tu peux taper dans tes
Minerva, happy birthday.
Yeah, okay. Next we have Leticia and Esteban. Yes. Oh, you want it? Okay, yeah, I want that.
Okay, this is the name. The title is Illuminate Your Shadow. And with all my heart and my has my heart. For Minerva! And it was inspired in her wonderful and beautiful work that everybody can.
So, what's he holding?
So I found my indigo African cloth, and I found a blue container and green peppers, one of which had a little bit of warmth on it, and I put them together and I drew a still life called Indigo, Green on Indigo, Green on Blue on Indigo. Then I decided to put my still lifes on the floor in a studio across the street in 225 Lafayette, and the floor was kind of pink, and I put stones and wood and rocks to make a still life. Then I got a disarticulated skeleton, lots of bones, all the bones of the human body except the skull. So I threw them on a table, and I moved them around just a little, somewhat randomly, and I drew them without understanding them. And then I drew the bones, and I finished the picture, so I painted a picture of the bones.
myself, Minerva, and the other friend that also was his birthday too. And Leticia, double effort. We were rehearsing last night, and he's spraying this little finger. So there she is.
So now we're going to have Julie Zimmerman accompanied by You're doing your own song.
We're gonna do 2 songs. We're gonna do an original that we co-wrote, and then we're gonna do Brazilian standards.
Yoo-hoo! Here's the samba booth.
My baby, put it in the camera.